Over the next week, I became obsessed with documentation. Every waking moment was spent compiling evidence, organizing timelines, and building an ironclad case that proved beyond any doubt that Creative Hub was my original concept. I started with the basics, my original 20-page document from March 18th. I exported it with metadata intact, showing the creation date and edit history. All the messages I'd sent to Marcus describing the idea. I took screenshots with timestamps visible. The comprehensive documentation I'd shared with him in June. Again, with all metadata preserved. But I went deeper than that. I found early sketches I'd drawn in my physical notebooks. I photographed every page, making sure the dates I'd written at the top of each entry were visible. I located calendar entries from our coffee shop meetings where I'd written things like "Share Creative Hub concept with Marcus" and "Creative Hub brainstorming session." I pulled up receipts from those coffee shop meetings, cross-referencing the dates and times with our conversation timestamps. I found draft emails I'd written to myself outlining features and strategies for Creative Hub, all dated months before Collective Creative existed. I even went through my browsing history and found evidence of my market research websites I'd visited, articles I'd read, competitors I'd analyzed, all dated back to March and April. Then I did a detailed comparison. I created a side-by-side document showing specific features, taglines, and strategies I'd developed for Creative Hub, alongside identical or near-identical elements on Collective Creative's website. The taglines were almost word-for-word the same. The feature list matched perfectly, even down to the order they were presented. The business model freemium with premium tiers was exactly what I'd outlined. The partnership strategy with creative schools was the exact channel I'd identified. Even some of the specific language in their mission statement echoed phrases I'd written in my original documentation. It was beyond coincidence. This was systematic replication. But here's where it got even more interesting. I found a conversation from July where Marcus had asked me very specific technical questions about payment processing and user verification. I'd explained my approach in detail. Then I looked at Collective Creative's privacy policy and terms of service. They used the exact same payment processor I'd told him I was planning to use. Their verification system worked the exact same way I'd described. He hadn't just stolen the concept. He'd stolen the implementation details. I compiled everything into a comprehensive document. Over 50 pages of evidence, organized chronologically, with clear comparisons and undeniable proof. This wasn't just a similar idea. This was theft. Plain and simple. Now I faced the hardest decision. What was I going to do with all this evidence? Part of me wanted to confront Marcus immediately. Show him everything I'd compiled and demand an explanation. Demand acknowledgement, demand justice. But another part of me hesitated. What would confrontation actually accomplish? Would Marcus admit what he'd done? Would he apologize? Would he offer to make things right? Or would he deny everything, gaslight me, and claim that we'd collaborated on the idea together? I spent days wrestling with this decision. I talked to my sister about it. She was furious on my behalf. "You need to expose him," she said, "publicly. Let everyone know what he did. He can't just get away with this." But I wasn't sure. Public exposure felt risky, messy. What if it backfired? What if people didn't believe me? I consulted with a lawyer friend. He reviewed my evidence and confirmed what I already knew. "You have a strong case for intellectual property theft," he said. "But here's the reality. Pursuing legal action would be expensive, time-consuming, and uncertain. You'd be fighting against a funded company. They'd have lawyers. It could drag on for years." "What if I just want him to acknowledge what he did?" I asked. "That's a personal matter, not a legal one," he said. "You could try sending a cease and desist letter. But if he's already launched and has investors, they're not going to just shut down. Best case, you might negotiate some kind of settlement or acknowledgement. Worst case, you end up in a long legal battle." I felt trapped. Every option seemed impossible. I tried to message Marcus again, more directly this time. "Marcus, I saw your launch of Collective Creative. We need to talk. This is serious." He responded within an hour. "Yeah, man, let's definitely catch up. I've been meaning to tell you all about it. How about coffee this Saturday? Our usual spot?" The casual tone of his message made my blood boil. He was still pretending, still playing dumb. Did he really think I wouldn't notice? Or was he just that comfortable with his betrayal? I agreed to meet him, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see his face when I confronted him with the truth. I needed to look him in the eye and understand how the person I trusted most in the world could do something like this. That Saturday morning felt like walking toward a cliff edge. I arrived at our usual coffee shop 15 minutes early. I wanted to be settled, prepared, in control. I sat in our corner booth with my laptop and a printed copy of my evidence document in a folder beside me. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times. But now that the moment was here, my mind felt blank. Marcus arrived right on time, looking relaxed and confident. He was wearing a Collective Creative branded t-shirt. The sight of it made me feel sick. "Hey," he said brightly, sliding into the booth across from me. "Man, it's been too long. How have you been?" I couldn't do small talk. I couldn't pretend. "Marcus, what is Collective Creative?" I asked directly. His smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "It's the project I've been telling you about, the secret work thing. I know I was vague about it, but I wanted to wait until launch to share details." "Tell me about how you came up with the idea," I said, my voice steady but cold. He launched into what was clearly a prepared pitch. "So, about a year ago, I was thinking about gaps in the creative economy. I realized there wasn't a good platform for creative professionals to really connect and collaborate. And I thought, what if we built something that was more than just a job board? Something that was a true community?" Every word out of his mouth was a knife in my chest. Those were my thoughts, my realizations, my words. "Marcus," I interrupted. "Stop." He paused, looking confused. "What's wrong?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was my original 20-page document from March, 3 years ago. "This is my concept for Creative Hub," I said, dated March 18th. I showed it to you the next day at this exact coffee shop. Do you remember? His face paled slightly, but he tried to maintain composure. Yeah, we talked about your idea. But nothing. I cut him off. I pulled out the printed evidence document. "This is 50 pages of documentation proving that every single feature, strategy, and element of Collective Creative was originally conceived by me for Creative Hub. Months before you even started your company. I slid the document across the table. The taglines are identical. The features match perfectly. The business model is exactly what I outlined. Even the specific technical implementation details match what I explained to you in our conversations. Marcus didn't touch the document. He just stared at it. I have timestamps, screenshots, original files with metadata, everything. I continued. This isn't a coincidence, Marcus. You took my idea and built it without me. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, he spoke, and his tone had shifted. Less friendly, more defensive. Look, ideas aren't proprietary, he said. Lots of people think about building platforms for creatives. Just because you had a similar concept doesn't mean I stole anything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Similar, I said, my voice rising. Marcus, it's not similar. It's identical. You asked me specific questions about every aspect of my platform. I shared my complete documentation with you. I trusted you. We were having conversations, he said, his voice harder now. Friends brainstorm together. That doesn't mean you own every idea that comes up. This wasn't brainstorming, I said, fighting to keep my anger in check. This was me developing a concept and sharing it with someone I thought I could trust, someone I thought was my friend. He leaned back, crossing his arms. So, what are you saying? You want credit? You want money? What is this? I want you to acknowledge what you did, I said. I want you to admit that you took my idea and built it without me. That you betrayed my trust. Over the next few days, I tried to process what had happened. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every expression, looking for some sign that my friend was still in there somewhere. But I couldn't find him. The Marcus I'd known wouldn't have done this, wouldn't have stolen, wouldn't have lied, which meant either I'd never really known him at all, or ambition had transformed him into someone else entirely. Neither option brought me comfort. I talked to other friends about what happened, carefully, without naming Marcus at first. I needed perspective. Everyone had the same reaction: shock, anger on my behalf, and advice to either go public or pursue legal action. But I was paralyzed with indecision. Going public felt like admitting defeat, like I couldn't handle this privately like an adult. Legal action felt overwhelming and expensive, with no guarantee of success. And doing nothing felt like letting him win. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't focus on work. My entire life felt like it had been thrown off its axis. I'd spent years building toward launching Creative Hub. It had been my purpose, my drive, my dream. And now that dream was gone. Stolen, repackaged, launched by someone else. Even if I still launched my version, it would always look like a copy now. Marcus had gotten to market first, with better funding and more polish. I'd lost before I'd even had a chance to compete. The injustice of it ate away at me. In my spiral of obsessive research following the confrontation, I started digging into something I'd never really considered before. How common is this? How often do people steal ideas from friends, colleagues, and collaborators? What I found shocked me. Idea theft in the startup world is disturbingly common. There are countless stories of co-founders being pushed out, early employees having their concepts stolen, friends and collaborators being cut out once the real work begins. There's even a term for it in Silicon Valley: founder dilution. The process by which the person with the original idea gets systematically marginalized until they're completely removed from the picture. I read story after story that mirrored my own experience. An entrepreneur who shared their concept with a mentor, only to watch that mentor launch the same business months later. A developer who built a prototype for a friend's collaboration, only to discover their friend had filed for patents under their own name. A designer who created an entire brand identity for a startup, only to be replaced once their designs were complete. The pattern was always the same: trust, exploitation, betrayal. And the most frustrating part? Many of these cases never got resolved. The thieves often won. They had the resources, the networks, the confidence to push forward, while their victims were left processing the betrayal. Legal cases were rare, and in my spiral of obsessive research following the confrontation, I started digging into something I'd never really considered before. How common is this? How often do people steal ideas from friends, colleagues, and collaborators? What I found shocked me. Idea theft in the startup world is disturbingly common. There are countless stories of co-founders being pushed out, early employees having their concepts stolen, friends and collaborators being cut out once the real work begins. There's even a term for it in Silicon Valley: founder dilution. The process by which the person with the original idea gets systematically marginalized until they're completely removed from the picture. I read story after story that mirrored my own experience. An entrepreneur who shared their concept with a mentor, only to watch that mentor launch the same business months later. A developer who built a prototype for a friend's collaboration, only to discover their friend had filed for patents under their own name. A designer who created an entire brand identity for a startup, only to be replaced once their designs were complete. The pattern was always the same: trust, exploitation, betrayal. And the most frustrating part? Many of these cases never got resolved. The thieves often won. They had the resources, the networks, the confidence to push forward, while their victims were left processing the betrayal. Legal cases were rare and expensive. Public call-outs were risky and often backfired on the accusers. The system seemed designed to protect the people who took bold action, even if that action involved stealing from others. I also learned about intellectual property law in the startup space. What I discovered was discouraging. Ideas, by themselves, aren't legally protected. You can't copyright or patent a general concept. What's protected is the specific expression of that idea, the code, the design, the written documentation. But even then, enforcement is difficult and expensive. If someone takes your idea and implements it in their own way, even if they clearly got the concept from you, proving theft is incredibly hard. It usually comes down to who can afford better lawyers. This realization hit me hard. Even with all my evidence, even with clear timestamps and documentation, there was no guarantee I'd win a legal battle. And fighting it would cost me time, money, and emotional energy that I wasn't sure I had. I felt trapped in a system that rewarded theft over integrity. For weeks, I was stuck in an impossible loop. Every morning, I'd wake up with a new plan. I'd pursue legal action, I'd go public, I'd expose Marcus for exactly what he'd done. But by evening, doubt would creep in. What if I lost? What if people didn't believe me? What if this consumed years of my life and led nowhere? My mental health was deteriorating. I'd lost 15 pounds. I couldn't concentrate at my day job. My other relationships were suffering because I couldn't talk about anything except what Marcus had done. I was becoming obsessed, consumed by anger and betrayal. My sister finally sat me down one night and said something that cut through all the noise. "I need to ask you something," she said gently. "And I want you to really think about it. What outcome would actually make you feel better?" I opened my mouth to answer, but she held up her hand. "Don't say justice or acknowledgement," she continued. "Those are concepts. I'm asking what specific, concrete outcome would allow you to move forward with your life." I sat with that question. Would I feel better if Marcus publicly admitted what he'd done? Maybe. But would he ever actually do that? No. Would I feel better if I won a legal case against him? Possibly. But would the years of legal battle be worth it? I wasn't sure. Would I feel better if Collective Creative failed and Creative Hub succeeded? In a way. But was I willing to dedicate the next several years to making that happen? Did I even still want to build Creative Hub after all this? The truth was, I didn't know. The dream had been poisoned. Every time I looked at my Creative Hub prototype now, all I could see was Marcus's betrayal. "I think," I finally said, "I just want him to understand what he took from me. Not just the idea, the friendship, the trust, everything." "And do you think there's any version of events where that happens?" my sister asked. I shook my head slowly. No. He's too deep in his own lie now. Admitting what he did would destroy everything he's built. "So you're seeking something that's impossible," she said. "And in the process, you're destroying yourself. Is that really what you want?" It was a harsh truth, but it was truth nonetheless. I was holding on to anger and hurt that was eating me alive, while Marcus was out there building his company, giving interviews, being celebrated as an innovator. My pain wasn't affecting him at all. It was only affecting me. But letting go felt like giving up, like saying what he did was okay, like allowing him to win without consequences. I didn't know how to reconcile these feelings. After that conversation with my sister, I gave myself a deadline. 1 week to decide what I was going to do. After that, no more deliberating, no more obsessing, just action. I spent that week exploring every possible path forward. Option 1. Legal action. I consulted with 3 different intellectual property attorneys. The consensus was the same across the board. I had evidence of conceptual theft, but proving it in court would be difficult and expensive. Initial legal fees alone would be around $50,000, with the case potentially costing upwards of $200,000 if it went to trial. Even if I won, the most likely outcome would be a financial settlement, not the destruction of collective creative or public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. And there was a significant chance I wouldn't win at all. The risk-reward ratio didn't make sense unless I had unlimited resources and unlimited emotional capacity for a multi-year legal battle. I didn't have either. Option 2. Public exposure. I could write a detailed blog post or social media thread outlining exactly what happened, with all my evidence, and let the court of public opinion decide. This option had appeal. It was free. It was immediate. It would force Marcus to respond. But it also had serious risks. If I went public, Marcus and Collective Creative's lawyers could potentially sue me for defamation, even if everything I said was true. Defending against that would cost money I didn't have. Public exposure could also backfire on me. I might look bitter, jealous, or vindictive. The startup community sometimes rallies against people who make public accusations, seeing them as troublemakers or poor sports. And even if people believed me, it might not change anything. Collective Creative had funding and momentum. A scandal might slow them down, but it probably wouldn't stop them. Option 3, private resolution. I could reach out to Marcus one more time, through a lawyer this time, and try to negotiate some kind of acknowledgement or settlement. Maybe a financial payout. Maybe a public credit on Collective Creative's website. Maybe an admission that the concept was co-developed rather than solely his. This felt like the most practical option, but it also felt like compromise, like accepting less than what I deserved. And there was no guarantee Marcus would negotiate anyway. He could just tell me to go away. Option 4, let it go. The hardest option to consider, the one that felt like defeat. I could choose to simply move on, accept that what happened was wrong, but that pursuing justice wasn't worth the cost. I could take the lessons learned about trust and intellectual property protection and apply them to future projects. I could use my anger and hurt as fuel to build something new, something even better than Creative Hub. This option would preserve my mental health, my finances, and my time. But it would mean Marcus faced no consequences. It would mean swallowing an injustice that would always hurt. By the end of the week, I'd made my decision. It wasn't the one I wanted to make, but it was the one I needed to make. I decided on a hybrid approach. Not full legal warfare, not total public exposure, but not silent acceptance either. I would do 3 things. First, I would document everything in a detailed private record with all evidence preserved and organized. This would serve as my insurance policy. If Collective Creative ever came after me, or if Marcus ever publicly misrepresented what happened, I'd have everything I needed to defend myself. Second, I would send Marcus one final communication through a lawyer, not a lawsuit. Just a cease and desist letter that clearly stated the facts, presented the evidence, and demanded that he stop misrepresenting himself as the sole originator of the Collective Creative concept. This wouldn't force him to admit anything publicly, but it would put him on notice that I had proof, and that I was willing to use it if necessary. Third, I would tell my story, but strategically, not as a public call-out of Marcus by name, but as a cautionary tale about intellectual property theft in the startup world. I'd write about the experience in general terms, without identifying him or his company. I'd share the lessons I'd learned about protecting your ideas, choosing collaborators wisely, and recognizing the warning signs of betrayal. This would allow me to process my experience, help others avoid the same fate, and maintain my integrity without engaging in a destructive public battle. It wasn't the dramatic justice I'd fantasized about, but it was measured, strategic, and most importantly, it would allow me to move forward. I hired an intellectual property attorney, and we drafted a cease and desist letter. It was professional, clear, and backed by irrefutable evidence. The letter stated that I had originated the concept for a creative professional networking platform in March, 3 years prior, and had shared comprehensive documentation with Marcus months before Collective Creative was incorporated. It demanded that Marcus cease any public claims that he was the sole originator of the concept, and that he acknowledge my role in the conceptual development, if ever directly asked about the origins of the platform. It did not demand money. It did not threaten immediate legal action. It simply established the facts and put him on notice. We sent it via certified mail to both Marcus personally and to Collective Creative's business address. Then I waited. The certified mail was signed for within 3 days. Then, nothing. No phone call, no email, no text message. Marcus didn't reach out to me at all. I didn't know if that was on advice from his lawyers or his own choice. Either way, the silence was deafening. After 2 weeks with no response, my attorney followed up with a formal letter requesting acknowledgement of receipt and response to the cease and desist. This time, we got a reply. But not from Marcus. From Collective Creative's corporate attorney. The letter was cold and legal. It stated that Collective Creative and its founders denied any wrongdoing or intellectual property theft. It claimed that the platform was independently developed and that any similarities to other concepts were coincidental. It further stated that Mr. Chen had no obligation to respond to baseless accusations, and that any further harassment or public defamation would be met with legal action. That last part was particularly galling. I was being threatened for simply asserting the truth. But the letter told me everything I needed to know. Marcus had made his choice. He was going to deny, defend, and threaten. He was never going to acknowledge what he'd done. Our friendship was truly over, and the person I'd considered my best friend was now treating me like an enemy.